Hi there, my name is Ron Rogers, and this presentation is titled Edwards Air Force Base in the Late 70s. I used to have clearance everywhere, and now they won't even let me on the base. Yes, that's young me, about 45 years ago or so. Edwards in the 70s was great. There was so much going on, and I had one of my guys, followers, suggest, why don't you talk about Edwards? And, in the 70s it was great because there was so much going on. And I thought, I'd been back there, 20 years ago or so for a couple of events, but I hadn't been to Edwards in a long time. And I thought, it'd really be fun to go back, see the old homestead, stuff like that. So I started looking into it, and they said, well, yeah, a couple times a year you can get clearance to come on, but it's through the windshield only. You can't get out of the car, and you have to be escorted and stuff like this. All right. And they also said, if you haven't been on base in 10 years, there's nothing in the housing area that's the same. And I go, 10 years? Well, I guess so. 45 years was a little too much. Now, back when I was out at Edwards, they actually did not have guard gates. Now, this is funny because I was at the training command at Vance Air Force Base, and you had to go through a guard gate, and you had to have an ID and the sticker on your car and stuff like this, so they wouldn't let you in. Edwards, you could just drive on anywhere in the base, and I thought that was real strange. Well, not anywhere. There was Contractors Row that you had to have special clearance for, but you could just drive onto the base. They finally put some guard shacks out there. I think it was in the late 70s due to actually restricting the flow of drugs on base, I was told was the primary reason. Well, I worked in current ops and the command post, so on my ID there, you saw those black things. Those were all the areas that I was able to go to. If the area was blacked out, you could go there. So I was going, and they related to Contractors Row, which was where all the test programs were primarily. And one day the lady's looking at my badge at the guard shack, and she's going, because I was going up to the F-16 or something like that, and she looks and goes, to check to make sure that I was authorized. And she go, well, heck, you're authorized to go everywhere. So she let me through. Now, this was the sign out at Edwards, very historic. I think it's in the museum out there. That was a sign at the time, dates, back to the 40s and 50s and stuff like that. Oh, so they had to get all fancy and modern and stuff, and they got this nice new sign out there now. Got rid of the old one. But the one thing we had out at Edwards was Joshua trees, and I'm sure they're still out there. Now, one thing about the housing area is you don't want your name on a street, because if your name's on a street, well, it's all right if you're really famous, but most of the people that the names are on the streets, it's because they're famous and dead. So you really don't want to do that. It's kind of like on the wall at the Happy Bottom Writing Club. You don't want your picture up on the wall because it means you're dead. Okay, so like Grissom, very famous astronaut there. And there's me, Roger. Now, it's not me, because I'm not famous and I'm not dead. I am not dead. So that probably relates to the lake bed, which is an interesting story, too, because it used to be Rodriguez Lake Bed. Then they anglicized it, and I don't know why anybody hasn't pointed that out. And, maybe, do you think you guys should change the name back? But no, nobody's addressed that. So, Google Earth is a wonderful thing. They wouldn't let me on base, but Google Earth got me on base. So I started looking at it, and I tell you, it was a shock. You see that blue arrow there and that whole kind of brown area there? That there's these little lighter and darker spots. That was the area where I lived, the whole housing area. Yeah, it's gone. Every bit of it is gone. It's returned to the desert. And that's about where my house was, 6868 Lindbergh. That little, you can see kind of the spots where the houses were, and I was next to the corner where it kind of goes around. So I'm pretty sure right there that was my house. Well, here's what it used to look like. That's my van, that's my wife, and that's our kids' toys there. Look at the nice green grass, in-ground watering system to keep the ground sort of green out in the desert. Look at all those trees and stuff. Interesting thing about this was like 4 inches of dirt on top of the desert floor. So those trees had roots that went down 4 inches and straight out. If you got a big windstorm, it pulled the tree up, and you could see that there were a lot of roots, but they didn't go down very far. And here's another shot a little closer. There's the fire hydrant. There's, oh, on the top, that little box there, that's the swamp cooler. Now they've all replaced these with the new modern, Freon type coolers or whatever coolant they're using. But this was the evaporative cooling type of swamp coolers that would give you 15 degrees. So, hey, if it was 100 degrees out, it was a nice balmy 85 inside. And there's the backyard looking over towards the one-car garage. And there's the patio area, and they had these cement block fences all around. The neighbor across the street, well, he wasn't very well liked, I guess is the best way to say it. And when he moved out there, we decided to have a party. So we had a party on his lawn, barbecue grills in, had a real nice time. And there's my oldest son helping my daughter. My youngest son wasn't born at the time, with putting on the appropriate flight equipment. And there's my daughter on the right, all ready to go fly jets. All right. That's what it used to look like. That's what it looks like now. Kind of depressing, actually, isn't it? All right, on to Edwards. Here's Balls 8, very famous B-52. I guess it's in a museum now. It launched a lot of things. Here's the side of it. I mean, it was a great airplane, but it just had a history of dropping things. I mean, that's the it took stuff up and it dropped it all over the place. Here's it dropping big heavy weights to test parachutes, and I chased this in the 38 with a photographer in the back seat getting photos. Here is, they called it a blivet, which just means big, heavy thing. It weighed about 55,000 pounds, and that little structure you see there inboard of the engines, that held things like the X-15 and stuff like that, and the lifting bodies. And they used it to hold this blivet, and they'd drop it, and they would test the space shuttle return parachutes. And there's an interesting tale about when the blivet didn't want to drop, and it's kind of hanging there by its fingertips. The hooks are. That's on another video I talk about dropping things out at Edwards. But a lot was going on. This was kind of the generic testing, getting ready for the space shuttle. We had the F-16. This is one of the prototypes, 568. That was early on in the program. We just had a couple of those. They were starting to get the production, the test ones to come in. This is pre-production, of course. We had the F-15 out there, sorry, with the orange tails there, signifying it was a test aircraft. And we had the A-10. We had the B-1. I mean, there was just a lot of stuff going on, and I got to chase all this stuff, and it was a lot of fun. Well, I didn't get to chase the YC-14 or 15. These were being chased by the O2, and I was in the O2 for a short time, but I didn't get a chance to chase this. They used the O2 just because this thing could fly so slowly, and I didn't get a chance to fly this aircraft out at Edwards. I got a chance to fly the C-17 for the Airline Pilots Association, but that's a story I'm going to tell later. And here's another picture of one of the test aircraft with just a lot of rudder there. And, of course, the other one you saw a lot of flaps, and they have the blown lift program. And the F-18 was coming out, and got to do a lot of ejection seat tests. I had a guy in the Navy who would fly the F-4, and I would fly chase in the 38. We got to be friends. We were both going to get out of the Air Force at the same time, and then the Navy offered him a deal he couldn't resist, so he stayed in, but I ended up getting out. And, of course, you had to be a real dummy to go along on this test, and that's what it was, an instrumented dummy. And we had the advanced air refueling boom that we had to test. This, if you guys are good, you'll notice this isn't it. This is the old boom. But we had to test on the advanced air refueling boom. It had to be certified all through the envelope for everything. So I chased the B-1 refueling, the C-5, the 15, the 16, the A-10, everything. It was just a lot of fun. And, of course, everything had test cards. This is for a B-1 mission that I chased. And we had the oddball stuff, like they brought the 15 and the 16 tack guys out there. This is a little bit later after the 16 program was much more developed, and they were starting to open up the first base up at Hill. And they got the fighter pilots good in it. They brought it back, and they go, okay, let's do a performance evaluation. So they would do accels, decels, turns, and stuff like this. And I went out on that mission where they got a lot of data, which is a better aircraft, which turns better, accelerates better, all this stuff. And of course, it's all, can't tell about that. Of course, you probably find it on YouTube somewhere. But anyway, I was number 4. We had the 15 and 16 doing the test mission. We had the F4 as area chase, and we had me as safety chase. And the interesting thing was, at the time, the F-15 was painted blue, so you look down there and you could see the big blue thing. If you're looking for the F4, you just followed the 2 smoke trails. The 16, that was the hard thing to find. That thing is small and was really hard to spot. And you know, if you're going against it to fight it, you know, you got to see the other aircraft, lose sight, lose fight, stuff like that. And going, that's a little difficult aircraft to pick out there if you don't have, of course, the appropriate radar and stuff like that, IR like they do, you know, now. And I had fun times going over to NASA and getting to fly their aircraft. I got much later to fly their F-18, but this is back when they had F-104s, and I got to fly the 104. That was a lot of fun. Got to do simulated shuttle approaches. I talk about that in another video. Now, the fun thing is, when Edwards puts on an air show, boy, does it put on an air show. You talk about having things that nobody else has. Now, this this is a more recent photograph, much after I was there. Of course, you can see that blue arrow, that points to a B-2, which didn't exist when I was out there. And also there's a C-17, which didn't exist because it was under the 2 developmental aircraft. And they have you can see the 747 that carried the shuttle, one of the 747s that carried it, and a few other historic aircraft. And not only do they have neat aircraft on static display, but they put on one heck of an air show with all the test aircraft. 15, 16, A-10 were all flew flight demonstrations, F-5 even. It was very, very fun to watch. So here's your typical air show. Well, do you get the Enterprise on top of a 747 at your air show? Probably not. Do you get the A-12 at your air show? Nope, probably not either. And this, of course, back when a few of them were still flying. And, of course, there were only 4 of these in existence. The B-1A, one of those is on demonstration. Okay, now here's the F-17. As you probably know, there was a fly-off competition between the F-16 and the F-17, and the F-17 lost. Where are you going, wait a minute, how could that have lost? It's the F-18 now. Well, yes, it is. The Navy decided they liked this aircraft, and they found it more suitable than the F-16, so they said, we want this aircraft. So they repurposed it, designed it, made a few little modifications, of course. That happens to all the test aircraft. The original Block 10 F-16 is nothing like the later ones now, and neither is the F-17 like the F-18. It's close, but, you know, they make a lot of modifications. Other fun things is F-86, and it's an F-86 out of China Lake with a little bunny on the tail there. But we had, I believe it was a female test pilot that flew this down from China Lake for our air show down there. And then the fun thing, there's me. You get to stand next to your aircraft, the one that you fly, and tell people all sorts of wonderful things about it, and they all get impressed, and you're standing there in your flight suit. Other fun things that are going on, of course, is we had all the approach and landing tests that were going on at the time. And we had a little funny game with my son, who was 5 at the time. We'd be walking around and, you know, on base, he'd be with me, and there'd be a sound of something flying. And he'd ask me, you know, without looking up, what that was. And I'd tell him, that's an F4, that's a 104, that's a T-38. And there was this one noise. I didn't know what it was, because I always knew, you know, you can recognize an airplane by the engine sound. So I always knew what it was, and I said, I don't know that one. I looked up, and it was the shuttle on top of the 47. So, okay, I can get away with that one. And, of course, here's the approach and landing tests. And then we had the adult facility at NASA there called the mate and demate facility for the shuttle to put it, after the shuttle actually drops the 47. I talk about that in another video, but for safety reasons, the separation does not occur till the shuttle is actually generating lift and the 47 isn't, so it actually drops away. Because they're worried about, see how close it is to that tail there? They're worried about the shuttle accidentally taking that off, and there were special procedures and facilities for that if it did take the tail off. But I talk about that in the other video. And of course, Edwards was full of fun aircraft. Have you ever seen that many windows in a KC-135? And of course, we had a lot of interesting aircraft. We had KC tail number 135, the production one. And I flew, there's a lot of things I flew chase on that I don't have slides for, make this thing 2 hours long sort of thing. But they were looking at the Airborne Laser Lab, putting it initially, it later went to a 747, but initially they had it in KC-135. So we had to do some flight test stuff. They would put little tufts around the turret up on top. And, of course, we had to chase that, and they had to clear it, the parameters for flight test. And also had a B-26 out there that they used. Calspan owned this, used it in the test pilot school. You could configure it for proverse yaw, adverse yaw, could make it super stable, super unstable, and it was to teach the test pilots out at the school to evaluate it. Unfortunately, just before this aircraft was to be retired, they had a failure of the wing spar, and all three people on board were unfortunately killed just a week before it was retired. Actually, the general was going to fly it on its last flight, and the aircraft went down a week before this. Now, of course, y'all know about Poncho Barnes' Happy Bottom Riding Club. There's me hiding under the table with Chuck Yeager and Poncho there, and all the pretty airplanes on the wall before it burned down. And there's the remains. Things in the desert, they stay for a long time. And that's the remains of the Happy Bottom Flying Club. And I have another little video where I talk about that. And there's the swimming pool. It's actually a fairly large facility there, and you can look on Google Earth and actually see it. It's off the end of the runways there, just a little north of west. And you can see it on Google Maps. You can zoom in on it. And they had the first jet aircraft that they flew in secrecy out at Edwards. They actually put a propeller on the front of it to transport it. And seeing some of the later photographs of the base, they've kind of cleaned this up quite a bit. The grasses are a lot greener around there. And in the little box there, that's the original engine for the aircraft. And of course, Edwards is just full of history. There's a sled track where they did some initial high-speed ejection seat tests. But the thing about Edwards, and it did this in the high desert, 2,300 feet, so it would get cool at night. It was hot during the day, but at night you could walk around, and that's when people did. But only once in my time out there did we get any snow. And we got a 4-inch snowstorm, and being officer in charge current ops, I called up and said, well, when are you going to have the runway plowed? And they said, we don't have a plow. We'll wait till it melts. So the base shut down for the day, and people made snowmen. But before that, my wife and I drove the kids 2.5 hours up into the hills to make snowmen. Our kids had not seen it, even though my youngest son there actually was born in Iowa. He spent 2 weeks there before I moved. We had a deal where we'd have a kid and then we'd move. And we finally got tired of that, so we stopped having kids, and so we got tired of moving. And finally, I decided to end my Air Force career. That's another story. I think I've told about that. But I ended up getting out, and of course, they give you a little plaque when you leave. Devotion to duty. What else can you say? Anyway, that's my story about Edwards Air Force Base back in the late 70s, and where I used to live. And it was just a great fun time to be out there. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.